All right. And again, if you're just joining us, make sure that your name either matches your name in the participant list, or go ahead and make sure that you throw your name in the chat just so we can make sure you get your sketches for today. No sign-in form that you need to do for this. Just make sure that your name matches. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our college prep session on minority serving institutions. We're super excited to present this during Black History Month and last week being Tribal Colleges and Universities Week. So perfect timing for this discussion. Super excited to be able to share with you all. We have a guest coming later who's going to be able to share a little bit more. So hopefully will be a really great time here. My name is Samantha Jackson. I am a career readiness consultant here at Kent ISD, and I'm joined by Catherine Goldberg, who is also a career readiness consultant. Real quick, for those who aren't familiar with career readiness at Kent ISD, so we are based here in Grand Rapids. Each of our consultants, there's 4 of us, and we each serve specific districts within Kent ISD. So over there on the left, we have kind of the list of schools that we help support. If you are in Kent ISD service area and you don't see your name, we do support you. Please just reach out to us and we will make sure to get you connected. Quick overview of what we do. We provide professional development like this. We also provide professional development within schools and districts and with small groups of people within schools related to college and career readiness. We help with EDP implementation. So whether that's using tools or more importantly, how to actually utilize those tools most effectively with your students. We help connect industry to classrooms through guest speakers and tours and panels and career fairs and things like that. We help develop and find career readiness resources. And really our overarching goal is to help schools engage in the K-12 career readiness planning process so that we're really making sure that we provide opportunities to students K-12 so that by the time they're in high school, ready to get going, that they are well prepared and they have had lots of opportunities to explore what they want to do. All right, so want to start off with a quick connection. So first of all, if you haven't, go ahead and throw your name and school, grade level, any of that info in the chat, just so we can kind of get a sense of who's in the Zoom room with us today. But we just want to take a second to reflect. So what was it like for yourself when you were researching colleges? Some things to think about. Who or what did you trust for recommendations as far as like what schools to consider? How did you decide where to apply? And did you feel like you had the right information to find your best fit? So you can answer any of those questions in the chat. If a couple of people want to come off mute and answer, we'd love to hear from people.
I can answer. My name is Kylie Johnson. I am a counselor at a CTE school currently. I went into college for psychology and I applied for local colleges because I knew I did not want to move out of the area. So that's how I did it. And then I talked with people that I went to high school with that were at that college to get information about it.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Kylie.
Welcome.
I can share too. I'm Meredith Bowder. In high school, I had a placement in the counseling office. And so it was very old school, like pamphlets and like files of things. So I think that's something to grow in, to learn how students are doing those things online. And then I did a couple college visits that really helped to solidify where I was going to learn to be a teacher at that point.
Thank you, Meredith. Yeah, some great things in the chat here. Definitely can be stressful. We're getting a lot of chatter here. This is awesome. I think it was Taryn said it had a very specific major. Yeah, which we love because we do hear oftentimes students don't necessarily think about where the majors are that they want to do. So yeah, if there's a specific major, figuring out who has that school closest to you definitely can be a huge factor. Yeah, didn't get a lot of direction. Far enough away to feel independent, yes. First gen. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I know myself, I was also first gen student, had no idea what I was doing, didn't know the difference between a private and a public, you know, especially growing up here in Michigan, like pretty much everyone talked about Michigan and Michigan State, like maybe a little bit of, you know, GRCC, maybe a little bit of Grand Valley, but for the most part, like that's what my parents knew and that's what they wanted. And then I just went totally rogue and applied to a random tiny school and went there with really no forethought before doing that. Thankfully, worked out great, but that unfortunately doesn't happen for everyone. So yeah, definitely can be overwhelming. Great. So we're hoping today to be able to dive a little bit deeper into this specific subset of institutions to really make sure that we can provide students with great information to help them make decisions based on that best fit. Yeah, I love this chatter happening. Thank you all so much for contributing, and feel free to keep going as we go along. And if you do have any questions as we go along, we'll have an opportunity for that, but also please feel free to throw those in the chat at any time as well. So for today's session, just kind of a lay of the land here. We're going to be starting off with some demographic information, like why are we having this conversation, help set the stage a little bit, talking about some reasons that students might consider some minority serving institutions, what are minority serving institutions, and going through kind of the big four buckets, also realizing there are many other designations, but these are kind of the federally designated buckets, and then going through some resources. So I will turn it over now to Catherine.
So if you've never had the pleasure of joining Samantha and I for one of our sessions, you might not know we sit in the same room so that we can have our nonverbals together. But that means that our computers don't always like us and fight against each other. So if it ever feels a little clunky in the transition between the two of us, it's because we have to like hit mute in 3 different places. So if anyone is ever on mute, don't be afraid to like throw in the chat or give us a wave to be like, can't hear you right now. So I am gonna kind of just set the stage here before we dive into more specifics. So just so that everybody has the same language and same terminology, today's session is focusing on a federal term for groups of colleges and universities, which is minority serving institutions. So we're using that term because it's the federal language there. And those institutions are recipients of funding through presidential executive orders and special legislation enacted over the past 20 years. Some of them, as we will talk about, have obviously been around for much longer than that, but it is typically a grouping based on some specialized funding that is available. But the goal of this program, the goal of this funding is to provide social and educational skills for students to overcome racial discrimination and limited economic opportunities. And so you'll see how that shows up in the spirit, in the programming of many of these institutions as well. Then just to get all of our alphabet soup acronyms out of the way. So the first one in alphabetical order is often referenced as AANAPSI. So that is our Asian American, it's actually not supposed to have a comma there, but Native American Pacific Islander serving institutions. Then we have our HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, HSIs, Hispanic serving institutions, and TCUs, tribal colleges and universities. And then this is not a federally designated term, but if you've been in this world, if you've been in these conversations, you may also hear the term PWIs. That would be a predominantly white institution. Those are the institutions that are probably the most common that we think of. They're just, yeah. So just want to put that terminology out there so that as we have today's conversation, everybody is on the same page. And I think before I kind of dive into some of the more data, I think it's important to acknowledge that the institutions we are talking about today are open enrollment for all students. Obviously, there are sort of specific students that may be the best fit with the institution. And so thinking about how you may disseminate today's learning is who are the students who need the information, but that also all students should receive the information as well, right? So that all students can make informed decisions, be aware of the options on the table, be aware of the various institutions, and be aware of some of the historical and systematic challenges within higher ed as well. To be informed citizens, right? So keeping in mind the origin or the founding of the school is important. The origin of an HBCU being founded at a time when African Americans were systematically excluded from higher education is really critical in the spirit of that institution. I think also that these terms are not wholly comprehensive, right? So some of these institutions receive these designations because they serve a certain percentage of students or because they've applied for a grant, but that there are other institutions that may serve similar percentages of students but haven't received the grant. So that's a lot of disclaimers and a lot of asterisks. All of that is to say, we are putting forth this information in the spirit of just expanding everyone's awareness, but know that please do continue to do more research, have more conversations, and know that what we are presenting today is not the end all be all. I will also acknowledge, I recognize I am a white woman who is presenting about minority serving institutions. I see my role as just providing the information and sharing it and as a starting point in the conversation, and recognize that I am by no means the expert or hold all of the answers on these pieces too. Okay. So as we dive into this, we thought it was important to just set the demographic landscape. Some of us are joining today from Kent County, which is where Samantha and I are housed and work out of. And some of us are joining us from across the state. So just to set the stage demographically for the state, you can see statistics on the racial and ethnic breakdown across our state. And then I will also show you how then Kent County looks in comparison to that. Just thinking about how many of these institutions are serving specific student populations, thought it is helpful to be aware of like, what is the breakdown? And I think cross-reference this state and county data against your own school's data, right? And the students that you serve. So if your student population looks more diverse than these statistics, then it may be helpful for you to keep in mind how important today's information will be for the vast majority of your students. If your demographics look less diverse or more predominantly white, then keep in mind it may be even that much more important for some of your students who may be underrepresented in your school to have access to this information as well. If you are curious and you're like, where did you get this data from? It comes from the My School data. And there is, when we send out the slideshow from today, it'll have a link so that you could look up your counties or your ISD's data as well. And then just thinking about the historical shifts. So over the last 10 years in Kent County, we have had a 7% reduction in the percentage of students who identify as white, but we have more students who identify as Hispanic or Latino, more students who identify as multiracial, and then slight increases in terms of students who identify as Black or Asian. And then anticipated shifts. So kind of the general data is that our society is becoming more diverse, and it's anticipated that by 2050, 40% of the working age population in the state of Michigan will be people of color. So just thinking, if it doesn't feel like this is the crucial information that you need today, it may be as our schools serve more diverse populations as well. All right, and then another piece of context for why today's session felt important to us to also include thinking about the inequitable access to higher education in terms of enrollment, but also graduation rates. So this first chart is looking at enrollment rates within the state of Michigan based on race and ethnicity. And so we see obviously that there are certain groups that are overrepresented and certain groups that are underrepresented. And then as we look at graduation rates, then this is a 6-year completion rate at 4-year schools, right? So it's that 150% graduation rate. We see a pretty stark difference and a pretty big split in terms of those outcomes. That one might be a little bit harder, but the top 2 lines represent Asian and white students. The average is 56.86, and then the orange line is our Hispanic students with 50%, Native American 47.5, and Black at 43.4. So again, that's the state of Michigan. That's not national. So trying to bring things a little bit more specific to our home state. All right, so kind of keeping that demographic information in mind, some reasons to consider these institutions or institutions that are supportive of student groups that we're talking about today. Sense of community. So you can see a quote from a student who attends an AANAPSIs school in California. I think what really stood out to me in this quote is about the embracing of their identity. And in a lot of the research and literature that we were reading as we prepared for this, it became increasingly important in the post-COVID world, and given a lot of the hate speech and hate acts that were occurring at that time and that have continued as well. So kind of that ability to embrace that identity, shaping somebody into a confident leader. Strong outcomes. So HBCUs award 25% of all bachelors in STEM fields for African Americans. So our ultimate goal is that students not only get to college, but get through and have choices in their careers. We know that STEM fields can be particularly intimidating or be more challenging to graduate from. So that's a powerful statistic. More strong outcomes. So in terms of tribal colleges, report that 86% of students attending a tribal college complete their chosen program of study. In contrast, if they were to go from a high school to mainstream college or universities, it's about 10%. So it's a pretty significant difference there. And then serving student needs. So this quote is that it is not simply that, oh, we have X percentage of students and we need them to graduate, but that it is about meeting the whole student, right? Kind of echoing that first quote as well about building that sense of community, about providing culturally responsive, culturally affirming practices that support students to live a full life while they're on campus and feel successful and connected in the process. All right, Samantha, anything else you want to chime in on? Okay, all right. Okay, I am going to jump us in then, diving into our first type of institution, so an HBCU, historically Black colleges and universities. You will notice as we go through today's conversation, we have a little bit more information about HBCUs, largely because of how long they have been around, largely because of some of the unique characteristics and elements that we'll talk about related to them. But we're going to go through each type of institution. And for the first 3, we will have data, talking points, videos, those pieces. For our fourth and final type of institution, we will also have a guest joining us from one of those institutions. So just wanted to lay the land before I dive in. Okay, so you are looking at a picture of Howard University. So just setting the stage, trying to give you some visuals of these institutions as well. In terms of history, HBCUs were established prior to 1964 with the principal mission of educating Black Americans, right? So keeping in mind, prior to 1964, these are founded and developed in an environment of legal segregation. So with the exclusion of Black Americans from higher education, creating institutions that would be available. As of 2022, there are 99 HBCUs that are recognized by the U.S. Department of Education. The number that is used sort of more colloquial or like culturally is 107. I did my best to try to figure out what the difference was between the 107 and the 99. And I believe it's a combination of ones that are either not federally recognized, a fair number of them are theological seminary schools, or schools that may have closed or lost their accreditation. So the number can change as certain schools come back online or gain reaccreditation as well. Of those 99, 20 offer associate degree programs. Some of them are associate degree only institutions. Some of them are universities that offer both bachelor's and associate degree programs as well. I think this quote really stood out to me, that the experience is sacred and respectful of one's ancestors. So as we're talking about these institutions, we are not merely talking about a major or what the career outcomes are for students, but we're talking about something more powerful in terms of that culturally affirming space for students as well. While we can't fly you all to Howard University and give you a taste of what it is like on campus, I am going to show a short video. This video takes place at North Carolina A&T, which is in Greensboro, North Carolina. I believe I have shared the sound appropriately, but if for some reason it doesn't, let us know in the chat.
Hope I don't mess it up. I'm pretty sure it's like this. Aggie pride.
We are on North Carolina A&T's campus on my school, Aggie. Aggie pride. First time I pulled out, I was so excited. Like I was literally a kid getting dropped off by his parents at school or something. And couldn't wait, was so anxious. I was ready to meet everybody, meet professors, coaches. I'm J.R. Smith. I am a 36-year-old freshman here at North Carolina A&T, and I play golf. When I stopped hooping, I had so much time on my hands, and I didn't know what to do. As athletes, focus on our sport so much that we forget that we also have a responsibility to ourselves to grow as a person as well. For me, being here at HBCU has been amazing because I've never been around so many people that look like me in a positive setting. And I see the pride in that.
So a lot of people don't know that Aggie Pride is actually an acronym. So it's achieving great goals in everything, producing renowned individuals dedicated to excellence.
So now we're headed to, we're driving around campus, but we headed to see Dr. Dawn Murphy to really get that Aggie Pride. Miss Murphy, how are you?
I'm well,
Dr.
how are
Murphy,
you?
I'm sorry. I'm a little late, I'm sorry, I apologize.
I hope you have a great excuse. Right?
Finals.
Oh, finish strong, my brother.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, love it.
Give me a better understanding of Aggie Pride. I know what it is, kind of. I've been here, 7, 8 months, and I see a lot of the students have pride in, being here at A&T, but what does it mean to you?
Let me ask you, what does it mean to you?
To me, it's responsibility. It's a responsibility to people who came before me, as well as laying the path for people who come after me. These are the 4 gentlemen that made a huge, huge impact.
I definitely feel proud about that sense of history that the school has, specifically about the Greensboro Fort.
They were freshman students who made such an impact and did such commitment to making sure that we had just basic human rights.
These 4 men did not sit down at that counter. Who's to say where we would be in history right now?
I am an Aggie, born and bred.
Yes, ma'am.
I went to undergrad and master's here.
Okay.
My husband works here. My children attended school here. So it's about a feeling you have of anything that an Aggie does, you're proud of the collective, not individual.
Yes, ma'am.
that Aggie pride is so real. So I always call myself an Aggie. The athletic programs at A&T are just amazing. That's what attracts a lot of people to the school. You hear a lot about how great our track and field teams are. We have an Olympic medalist here, I think 2, maybe 3 at this point.
Got these little robots that deliver the food to kids' dorms and whatnot.
On this campus, we have a $90 million engineering research innovation center, and we're running towards our R1 certification in terms of research.
My daughter wanted to be an engineer. Of course you're coming to A&T. We graduate the most African-American engineers.
If you hungry at the homecoming and you leave still hungry, that's your fault.
GHO is the greatest homecoming on earth. That's not us being braggarts, that is a fact.
Well, what do you feel like the biggest difference between the generation since you were here and now seeing your sons graduate?
Well, I do think that our students now understand the power of their voices.
Yes.
Than when I was in school, and they will tell you so. and I love that they have voices and they have opinions, and we are very passionate about cultivating that, though. I mean, it's a way to do everything.
100%.
Shine your light, brother. You're gonna do well. I look forward to seeing you at graduation, and I look forward to working with you.
I appreciate you.
Thank you.
I really feel like you're my auntie now, so I appreciate you,
Bless
auntie.
your heart. Thank you, darling.
I want to inspire young African Americans to come back to school, get your education, get your degree, inspire yourself to be something more.
Hope I don't mess it up. I'm pretty sure.
All right. So that you can see, this is a brief map. When we share the resources, we have a Google map that is interactive, where you can actually click within and see more details about each campus. But this is a visual of where campuses are spread out, understanding the history of HBCUs in our country. They are concentrated more in the South and Southeast as well. So I am going to dig into some more information. Oh, also, there is one in the US Virgin Islands as well. So that is a fun fact to be aware of. All right. So some nuances of the application process. I will talk first. Many HBCUs use the Common App or use a school-specific application, right? So go to Bowie State's website, and then you would use their application link. But the Common Black application is another way for students to apply. One of the benefits here, it is $20 to apply to more than 50 institutions. When a student applies using the Common Black College app, their application and all of their information is made available to all participating schools once submitted. So slightly different than the Common App where you have to choose the schools. This is more of just, hey, here, everybody, you have all of my information. Students would select their top 4 enrollment preferences, but other institutions can still see their information and make decisions as well. The other unique piece for school counselors to be aware of is that there's a counselor portal then to upload supporting documentation. So when a student makes an application on the Common Black College app, then they have to enter their school counselor's information, which triggers an email so that then you can upload supporting documentation. So the hope there is also streamlining the document submission process as they are applying to each of those institutions. Again, thinking about the student experiences, HBCUs represent only 3% of higher ed institutions, but enroll 16% of all African-American students and award 24% of all bachelor's degrees earned by African-American students. So clearly playing an important role in our higher ed options. To put some context, in terms of students who have come from Kent ISD's service area, we've had 13 students enroll at 8 different institutions, which you can see. To the best of our knowledge, the Tennessee State University connection there is as a result of a powerful college advisor at a high school in the area. So I think that's a testament also to the relationships and going back to our warmer of who do you go to, who do you trust for this information, and how important people and connections and relationships are in making that application and ultimate enrollment decision as well. Some additional resources and recommendations. So the 107 is a website all about HBCUs. One of the resources that they offer that is really unique is a program finder. So I think in general, if you're using kind of your typical college search engines, you can find the HBCUs, but to be able to differentiate the nuances between the types of institutions and knowing whether it's the right fit for a student, I think that program finder is generally one of the best resources for that. And then if you are working with younger students, or if you are thinking about how can we share this information more broadly so that it doesn't live only within the college application process, we've shared a PBS documentary. It's 6 minutes long. It's through their Making Black America series about HBCUs. And then again, obviously, if a student can't get to campus, probably the next best thing is to be able to engage with admissions officers from HBCUs. So the Detroit Black College Expo is something that has happened for the past couple of years. If you're here in Kent County, we know that that is a hike to get there, but wanted to share past dates so that if it happens again, you have an awareness of what that is. I know that some schools have sponsored buses, or community-based organizations, churches, after school programs have sponsored buses to those. Those can be an amazing opportunity just to sort of have that sense of community, have that excitement. And many students can walk away from those with on-site admissions decisions as well. All right. The last component that we want to talk about related to HBCUs, which we have a couple of resources also when we get to HSIs, is this idea of financial feasibility and financially safer options. So there's an organization, You Aspire, that does some phenomenal work in the financial aid and financial feasibility world. And they talk about, I'm going to click on this and hopefully you all can still see this. Great. So they talk a lot about this idea of financially safer colleges. And that financially safer refers to a school with a lower bill, right? So schools that families who have low to moderate income would pay less out of pocket. But they also add some really important nuances around the outcomes for students. So yes, a school could cost less, but if the graduation rate is really low, or if students leave with a ton of debt, or if students' career outcomes don't help them recoup the cost of their degree, that's not technically a financially safer college. So I'm getting really in the weeds here, but I think the headline is as we think about HBCUs, there can be some really strong options because they have a low cost and strong outcomes. So strong outcomes in terms of graduation, strong outcomes in terms of career opportunities and earning salaries that help a student pay back loans or feel like the investment in college was worth it. So this resource we will share afterwards. But as we look at HBCUs, there are private institutions that are financially safer. And then there are public HBCUs that are considered financially safer. And it's that combination of a lower cost of attendance with improved and strong outcomes as well. Then as you also think about that financial feasibility, what I'm about to show you is a chart of costs of attendance to compare side by side. Excuse me, this is billed expenses. So this is what you would be charged for tuition and fees, room and board at different institutions. I'm going to give you a minute to just get adjusted to the chart and wrap your head around it for a second. So what you're looking at is side by side for 4 options. You see North Carolina A&T, Michigan State, Purdue, and Loyola Chicago. So the way I was thinking about this is if you've got a student who's like, I really want to go out of state, I really want to be independent, it's really important to me to kind of have that distance for whatever reason, they might think of a Purdue or a Loyola Chicago, right? And I just wanted to put North Carolina A&T side by side with that to be able to show what before financial aid, just the significant cost savings there in terms of it. And then also to put it side by side with an in-state option, thinking about, yes, it is more expensive. However, it is not tens and 20s and 30s thousands of dollars more expensive. So when a student says, hey, I want to go out of state, our initial reaction might be, woo, that's going to be really expensive. But as we all know with the financial aid process, there are so many more layers and details to it as well. But just looking at the billed expenses, tuition fees, room and board, you can see that side-by-side comparison. All right. I am going to pause here. I'm going to look at the chat. So I see one question, which is, when should students begin to apply for scholarships? I would say this is regardless of the type of institution. It's going to depend a lot on the types of scholarships that they are applying for. So there are some scholarships like Big Future, where students are taking advantage of opportunities all the way through their high school experience. They can earn scholarships by the time that they are a senior. So that's one for earlier in the process. Some of the most highly selective scholarships that have some of the strongest outcomes, so things like Coca-Cola Scholars or Jack Kent Cooke, typically have a selection. Questbridge could be considered in there. Typically have a selection process that begins in the spring of junior year or summer before senior year. A lot of those require sort of like an initial application, and then students move through waves of that application. So those are some of the really big ones that offer really powerful community connection as well as large financial benefits. And then beyond that, it's going to be scholarship specific. So my best recommendation when I was doing this work is to have students think about scholarships like a part-time job. So set aside an hour or two a week where you work on some applications. If you get $1,000 out of that, then you just had a really powerful hourly wage. But not to say, oh, I'll do it later, but just say, okay, I'm going to send 5 off today, and in 2 weeks, I'll send 5 more off along the way. So sorry not to have a short and sweet answer to that, but cool. I am going to now switch into our second grouping. Yes, we will we will upload this PD to YouTube. You are more than welcome to share it with colleagues, families, whoever you think would be appropriate to share the resource with. Cool. All right, I'm going to switch gears into Asian American, Native American, Pacific Islander serving institutions. So this is one of our youngest designations federally. So they were established in 2007. This is a notably different designation, or what is needed in order to qualify, which is that institutions must meet 2 primary federal eligibility requirements. So they must enroll and maintain at least 10% of Asian American or Native American Pacific Islander students in an undergraduate population. And they must meet specific criteria of federal legislation, which is typically understood as enrolling a significant portion of students from low socioeconomic backgrounds. So there's some financial need combined with the demographic population there. What that means is there are many institutions that are eligible for this, but that maybe have not applied for the grant. And so there are many institutions that may meet that 10% or may meet that financial need, but have not applied for the grant or received the grant. I think similar to what we heard in some of the quotes and some of the stories around HBCUs, AANAPSI institutions, through innovative and culturally relevant academic and student support services, co-curricular programming, research, scholarship, foster and bolster student academic success and achievement. Okay. So these are about more than simply demographics. This is about that culturally affirming, culturally relevant space. We are going to listen to a short student testimonial about the power of this.
It's cultivating a familial atmosphere for our students. For Pacific Islander students, for Native Hawaiians, our family is a huge part of who we are and our identity. And so being able to meet administrators that recognize that we're not just students, right? We represent our families, we represent our communities. Like, those are the affirming spaces that we need to be a part of, that make us feel like we can be successful, that we can be who we are in these spaces that were not originally created for us. It's really thinking about culturally relevant approaches to serving our students that are necessary.
All right, and then on the screen, you can see the map of institutions that were either historically funded or currently funded AANAPSI institutions. You will likely see that this mirrors the demographic sort of makeup of our country as well, right? So thinking about where our largest geographic populations are is where there's more institutions as well, just thinking about those criteria for schools. All right, and then I think the other piece, particularly on this type of institution, just to name and to acknowledge, is there's a wide variety of lived experiences within this designation, right? So sharing some of this data just to show the diversity of the lived experience for Asian American or Native American Pacific Islander students, and thinking about particularly that criteria around being a student from a low-income background. So this graph is the percentage of adults who have not attended college by their ethnicity. And we can see that particularly within Cambodian, Laotian, and Hmong, those are pretty high rates, and this assumes graduation from high school. So if you expand that even higher, it's a higher education may feel even more out of reach or unfamiliar for some of those students as well, just given the high numbers who have not had access to it historically. All right. Thinking about the application process. So there is going to be a wide variety here because these institutions are typically not united together in the same way that like an HBCU might be united together, right? These are institutions that have been around for many years that are now applying for federal designation based on the students that they serve. However, application process is probably going to be similar to what you're already working with, Common App, school-specific websites. If students are applying to schools in California, the UC system and the California state system have their own unique processes. But Common App school-specific website is where you can find the nuances to those application processes. And then just one note, as we consider the admissions landscape after the banning of the use of race in admissions by the Supreme Court this past summer, thinking about institutions that are no longer asking for race or ethnicity on an application, the role of the essay is going to be super important for a student to be able to share about that identity, right? And based on your own capacity and your own knowledge and relationship with the student, the counselor letter of recommendation can be really important as well, right? So if you know if the student is first generation college going, that's going to be a really important thing to include in your letter as well. And then also, if you joined us for our last session earlier this fall, we talked about it. But even though schools are no longer allowed to use race and ethnicity in making admissions decisions, they can use race and ethnicity in their enrollment and yield process. So it can be super helpful to still have students use those boxes to indicate so that universities can then reach out to students about supportive programming or to connect them with students who may share identities so that then they can support them in making their decision or support them as they enroll at that institution. So just because race is no longer allowed to be used in the admissions decision does not mean that race is not an important process as a student makes their ultimate decision or about the resources and connections that a university can provide. That sound, did that? Okay, I'm looking at Samantha to see like if there's questions or confusion there, let me know. Student experience, just wanted to give you some examples of how this federal funding has been used. So one institution created a student center for Asian American and Native American Pacific Islanders. Laney College established English language programming and curriculum. So thinking about the high number of students that identified as Asian American who were also English language learners, they were able to strengthen their programming and curriculum for students. University of Maryland was able to add additional courses within their Asian American Studies program. So that's just a variety of ways that these institutions are providing culturally relevant, culturally affirming practices. And then we have a quote from a professor and a former AANAPSI program director that I think just speaks to the community and the impact both on students, but also faculty and staff as well. But I just think the quote about we've built something that really beautiful that's going to be here for a long time speaks to the power of this support. And then in terms of resources and recommendations, this APEI Scholars website had some great information and resources as well. All right, you've heard me talk for a while. I'm going to turn it over to Samantha, who's going to lead us through our last two types of MSIs.
All right. And I know I put this disclaimer in the chat, but I think it's particularly important for the next two. For the most part, we're using the language that the specific sources are using. So we do realize there's a lot of nuances when it comes to different terminology used. So just know that it's coming from the sources, but just, yeah, disclaimer. All right, so tribal colleges and universities. The first tribal college was established in 1968, which was DNA College in Arizona, and that is still a fully functioning college. There are currently 35 accredited tribal colleges, and tribal colleges and HBCUs are both authorized under the Land Grant Act. So similar to schools like Michigan State, a lot of the ag schools, that's where these are authorized through. So currently 35 accredited, all offer, or almost all offer associates programs. 32 now offer bachelor's programs, 2 offer masters, and just last year, Navajo Technical University became the first to offer a PhD, and their PhD is in DNA culture and language sustainability. All tribal colleges are public institutions, and all are open to almost all are open to everyone, and they're chartered either by their federally recognized tribal governments or through the federal government. So most of them are located on or near tribal lands. They were similar to HBCUs. These ones were built out of a specific need because Native populations were historically excluded from higher education. And even in the cases where they weren't excluded, they really found a need to build these colleges to preserve knowledge and traditions and culture and language, and to really help educate students who had otherwise been failed by the traditional education system. So, our stats show that 14.5% of natives over 25 have a degree of any form, compared to 31% of the rest of the population based on federal graduation guidelines. So, we're looking at about half. And so we know that a lot of Native students don't want to travel far from home. They need to, be with community. And so we found that, if they were traveling for other schools, a lot of times they were not being able to be retained or to graduate. And TCUs are generally funded through federal programs and private donations. So they don't typically receive any state funding. And the main federal program that they do receive funding through provides a set amount of money per Native student only. So we'll talk a little bit about the kind of makeup of tribal colleges, but they get about $8,600 per Native student that attends. And since the beginning of the pandemic, there has been kind of a recognized importance of tribal colleges and a little bit of renewed interest and investment in their success, which included $190 billion from the American Rescue Plan. Then there was also some additional funding that was provided for kind of more infrastructure things related to things like internet. TCUs tend to be very, very low cost, which partly is because 86% of the students attending receive Pell Grants. So we know that these are in low income areas, and so they want to serve their communities, keeping the costs low. On average, students pay less than $3,000 at tribal colleges, and many are eligible for other scholarships. And that's $3,000 before any scholarships, like $3,000 tuition and fees total. So can be a really low cost option. Oh, I love that, Linda. Has a student dual enrolled at Saginaw Chippewa. Love that. That's so amazing. All right, so here we have a map of the tribal colleges in Michigan. So we do have 3 located in Michigan, one in the Lower Peninsula, Saginaw Chippewa Tribal College. That one only offers associates programs. And then 2 in the Upper Peninsula, we have Bay Mills Community College and Keweenaw Bay Ojibwa Community College. All right, another quick video here. This one comes from the American Indian College Fund, talking a little bit about why or the benefits of tribal colleges.
When I decided to go to college, I knew that I wanted to go to a tribal college.
Having a family and starting school at a later age, I was trying to get the best education I can with the least possible cost. And coming to a tribal college, I was able to, I knew I could afford it. And
when I decided to go to college, I knew that I wanted to go to a tribal college.
having a family and starting school at a later age, I was trying to get the best education I can with the least possible cost. And coming to a tribal college, I was able to, I knew I could afford it. And it was something that I feel like it's important to raise my children amongst other Native American tribes. And so it's something, the cost of it and just being able to raise my children around other cultures was important to me.
It was close to home. It was close to home, and culturally, you know, I've lived here on the reservation, so I feel a lot more comfortable here than if I were to go to, you know, say, university or something. I'm planning on going to grad school, though.
A unique characteristic of being at a tribal college, it's very hard to articulate because at the risk of sounding really corny, it's good for my spirit. I mean, it's good for me to be with people who are like-minded. And I looked at the curriculum on the website and I saw that there was kind of a traditional angle to every course. So to me, that was appealing.
And that's the beauty of tribal colleges, is we're open to everybody. Our philosophy is open to everybody, and we just have that viewpoint. And I think nationally, they're now focusing more on us to show them the way for sustainability. And we looked at literature on 4, 5, or 6 different disciplines, and they all had the same term for how groundwater and surface water were interacting, but they were in different journals in different terms, but we were all seeing the same thing. And now the scientists are saying, let's do interdisciplinary research. Well, that's what natives have been doing forever, is interdisciplinary research just by observation, right? And so people are turning to the tribal colleges and saying, hey, you have a different perspective. Your students have different perspectives, and we want to see that perspective in our research. We want to see that perspective in our policies. We want to see that perspective in our societies and communities at large.
It's a big family of people all trying to make their lives better and their community better. And I wouldn't be able to just pick one thing, I guess.
When I decided to
Thank you for bearing with us on the sound issue. All right, so most tribal colleges are open enrollment. Again, they're public institutions. There are 2 that only accept Native students, one in Kansas and one in New Mexico, but the other 33 are open to anyone, as you heard in the video. Most do not require any tribal affiliation, but most will require something called a certificate of degree of Indian blood, which essentially is looking at ancestry. And a lot of that, again, is because of the funding sources. So because their funding comes directly based on Native students, that's required to be able to receive that funding for those students. But it is not a requirement to attend most of these colleges. Some of them do accept VA benefits, most accept VA benefits, but most are not able to accept any international students. Most tribal colleges have very, very small enrollments. They're averaging about 400 students. One of the largest is that first, DNA College, which has about 2,000 students. And Saginaw Chippewa is actually one of the smallest. They have 20 full-time students and about 130 students total between dual enrollment, full-time, part-time, certifications, et cetera. One of the great benefits, because it is so ingrained in the community, is that they provide a lot of wraparound services. So things like tutoring services, service learning opportunities within the community. A lot of them offer childcare, food pantries, financial aid and support for living expenses, things like that. Again, because it is so ingrained within the community. And oftentimes they serve as kind of cultural hubs and community hubs within their communities. They also do offer things like athletics. So some of them have sports teams that compete, and some of them do also offer housing on campus. There is a huge focus for these institutions on culture, language, and tradition. So again, retaining and teaching the next generation about their specific culture. Sorry, I lost. And then about 20% of students attending tribal colleges are non-native. So again, it is open to everyone. And another really great benefit to tribal colleges is that about 30 to 40% of faculty at tribal colleges are native and from the local communities, which is compared to less than 1% of full-time faculty at other institutions. And then, as Catherine stated earlier, 86% of tribal college students complete their program, Native students at tribal colleges, compared to fewer than 10% of those same students that are attending other colleges. So really, really high outcomes for those students. All right, have tons of resources and recommendations over there for you to take a look at. There are some specific scholarships available. So have some information there about the Michigan Indian Tuition Waiver, the American Indian College Fund. But again, just a quote to, kind of lift up the importance of tribal colleges. For a lot of these schools, they are often the only post-secondary institutions within some of the poorest rural areas. So if we think about where they're located, they're primarily located in the West and Southwest. Montana has the most or the highest number of tribal colleges. And if you think of even the number of just institutions in general in Montana, their tribal colleges almost, if not outnumber the number of other institutions in the state. So again, they're serving a really important need for not only these students, but also for the communities that they're placed in. All right, and last but certainly not least, we are going to jump into Hispanic serving institutions. I'm going to give you a little bit of framework here, some history, and then we will have our guest speak. So pictured here, we have Elmhurst University, located in Illinois. Hispanic serving institutions were established in 1992 under the Higher Education Act and then first started receiving funding in 1995. And they really began as a grassroots effort by educators in the Southwest to recognize and support their large numbers of Latinx students. So again, it's kind of different from HBCUs and TCUs. They weren't built for the specific purpose to serve this population of students. Rather, it came out of a need to be able to provide greater support to the students that were already coming to their institutions. Eligible institutions must have an undergraduate enrollment, full-time undergraduate enrollment that is at least 25% Hispanic students, and also high enrollment of students in financial need, which usually looks something like a certain percentage of students receiving a Pell Grant. Again, similar to AANAPSIs, schools do have to apply for this designation and for the grant funding. So you will see some schools that qualify but haven't applied for whatever reason to receive that funding. There are 572 Hispanic serving institutions as of 2022. 226 are two-year public, 165 four-year public, 172 four-year private, and 9 two-year private. So really quite a spectrum there. And then maybe even more surprisingly, or kind of telling, is that there are 400 emerging Hispanic institutions. So an emerging HSI is a school that has 15 to 24.9% of their enrollment that are Hispanic students. And we actually do have 3 emerging Hispanic institutions or Hispanic serving institutions in the state of Michigan. So we have Andrews University, Kalamazoo College, and Sacred Heart Major Seminary. And we've seen a couple of these actually have gone kind of like up and down in terms of the enrollment, just getting over that 25% and then coming back down. And so the designation is not like a forever thing. They have to apply and they have to keep those numbers kind of year over year. All right, a map here. When you get the slides, you'll be able to see a little bit better, but just to kind of show you what the geographic distribution looks like for these colleges. So thank you. So again, you'll notice based on the population, you're seeing a lot of them in the West and kind of the South and Southwest. Again, here in Michigan, you'll see we currently have 0. So the numbers there, the green percentage is the percentage of Hispanic undergraduate students within the state. The top number is how many Hispanic serving institutions that state has. And then the bottom blue number is how many emerging Hispanic institutions each school has, or each state has, sorry. All right, Hispanic serving institutions represent only 17% of higher education institutions, but are serving 2/3 of Hispanic college students. And one really important thing with a lot of our HSIs, and this will differ even based on geographic region and type of institution, but these students may be more likely to move between that full and part-time status. So they might be going full-time a fall semester and then moving to part-time for a couple semesters and moving back and forth. And so sometimes this makes it so that their graduation rates are not accurately captured in some stats. Because a lot of times we're looking at students who are exclusively full-time over usually a 4 and 6 year period. But kind of looking at these outcomes for these students that are exclusively full-time, they tend to have higher graduation rates, Hispanic students attending HSIs, at about 74% compared to about 42% of students attending other institutions. Again, looking at Kent ISD, in 2022, we had 35 students that enrolled at 19 different HSIs. The top ones being Arizona State University, and then tied for second were University of Central Florida, San Diego State University, and Elmhurst University, which brings us to our guest speaker. We have Carrie. Here, there she is. Carrie is joining us. Carrie is an admissions counselor from Elmhurst University in Elmhurst, Illinois, which again is one of the top destinations for students from Kent County. So excited to bring Carrie on to talk a little bit about working at an HSI and what that looks like. So I'll turn it to Carrie.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here, and good morning to everyone in attendance. If I could, would you mind if I took over screen sharing? I have a quick little presentation I'd like to show everyone. Perfect. Thank you so much. Here we go. Start this presentation. Perfect. All right. Wonderful. Well, as Samantha said, my name is Carrie Ostergaard. I am a first-year admission counselor for Elmhurst University. I've been with the Office of Admission for a little over a year and a half. Prior to that, I have my own personal experience at Elmhurst University because I was a student. I graduated in 2022 after transferring in 2020. So even before that, I was at another four-year institution and even went to my local community college. So if anyone has any questions about that experience, I'm always happy to help, both in the realm of being a student at a place like Elmhurst and of course, working in the Office of Admission. Speaking of Elmhurst, I have to go ahead and quickly talk about our institution before getting into the HSI specific details, just to kind of provide you with some background. So we were founded in 1871, just celebrated our 150-year anniversary a couple of years ago. It has a big, long, fancy name that I cannot pronounce still to this day. So 150 years old at least. We are designated as a private liberal arts university. So we do go above and beyond in terms of our general education curriculum, in addition to, of course, whatever major you would choose to study. We are on the smaller side. Undergraduate enrollment-wise, we have just around 3,100 students total. So these would be students studying for their bachelor's degrees, whether that's a bachelor's of science, bachelor's of arts, bachelor's of fine arts. Everything combined, though, we have just under 4,000 students. We have a couple of special, more specific student populations, and then some grad students as well. So just under 4,000 students. Student to faculty ratio is 13:1, and 79% of our faculty have the highest degrees in their field. So with the small size and that student faculty ratio, we really are going to be working with these true experts. There aren't any TAs, so you really are going to be able to develop these close one-on-one relationships with these experts. And we are primarily a commuter school. Of that 3,100 undergraduate students, about 2,000 or so do commute on a daily basis, but we have the capacity to house up to 1,000 students on our campus between 6 residence halls, a couple small apartment buildings, and a bunch of houses. And yeah, just a little slice of Elmhurst. We're a very involved campus, being on the smaller side, over 100 student organizations. We are NCAA Division III. So we have 20 sports teams, 10 men's, 10 women's. If you want to go through the recruitment process, you can definitely start that process in the Office of Admission as well. Very big on service between all these organizations and just the university in general. And we do have some Greek life if you wanted to get involved in that. Program-wise, we have over 70 programs to choose from. So there is quite a bit of flexibility, whether you know for sure what you want to study prior to applying for colleges, or you're just quite not sure yet. You have the flexibility to explore majors for sure during that freshman, sophomore year. So if you're not sure, if you change your mind, you totally can. I didn't decide on my major until my junior year. So you have that flexibility at Elmhurst University. Our top programs, though, are listed here. Definitely nursing, education, business are kind of our top 3. But the top 5, top 10, top 20 fluctuates on a yearly basis. So all the programs are pretty strong. And then we have 16 pre-professional programs. So for anyone who's wanting to do something like pre-medicine or pre-dentistry or pre-law, we have designated academic affiliations with tons of institutions all over the country, like Lake Erie College of Osteopathic Medicine for medicine, University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign for veterinary medicine, and so on and so forth. So we really try and make Elmhurst that perfect first stop for you before you move on to wherever your career is going to take you, graduate school-wise or medical school-wise. All right. So just to talk more about the Elmhurst University being a Hispanic serving institution, just wanted to provide you with a brief timeline on the past couple of years and the developments that have occurred. So we became a designated Hispanic serving institution in January of 2022. So then on October of 2022, we received a $3.4 million Title V designated Hispanic serving institution grant, La Promesa Azul, to support and improve the attainment of our Hispanic students. In September of 2023, so pretty recently, we actually had the grand opening of what we call El Centro de la Promesa Azul, which I'll get more details to you on that later in these slides here. But this has certainly been a newer development for us, and we've put a lot of focus and attention on being a Hispanic serving institution over the past couple of years. Now, for Elmhurst, what does this mean? This designation has opened the door to provide our Hispanic, Latinx, and underrepresented students with a successful Elmhurst experience. And then, as Samantha was mentioning, HSIs are defined in Title V of the Higher Education Act as not-for-profit institutions of higher learning with a full-time equivalent undergraduate student enrollment that is at least 25% Hispanic. So that's what you're going to find at Elmhurst University is at least 25% of our students do identify as Hispanic, Latinx. And we have a few different goals with the grant that we received last October. The first goal was to establish the Center for Excellence and Achievement, or Centro para la Excelencia y Logro. Number 2, strengthening the first-year seminar program and pedagogy through faculty development initiatives and curricular revisions. At the university, we have what's called an FYS initiative, or first-year seminar. So every single first-year student that starts at Elmhurst, their first year is going to take what's called an FYS, and these cover a bunch of different subjects. It might be the city of Chicago, it might be theater. We even have one about martial arts, Taekwondo. So the goal with this grant is to establish curriculum that would focus on being a Hispanic serving institution. So to provide more versatility and more variety there. And finally, number 3, increase undeserved student participation in high impact practices by increasing access and removing obstacles. So the last thing I wanted to mention to you all about Elmhurst University specifically is we have accomplished our first goal already. In September of 2023, we opened El Centro de la Promesa Azul, which the students fondly call El Centro. And it is a culturally inclusive space on our campus that is aimed at nurturing student success among the university's Latinx and Hispanic students, as well as undeserved and first-generation students. But it really is a location for all. It is very inclusive, and it's sort of has proven to be a student hangout spot, a student studying spot. We host events in that space, and we have several staff members working within that space that are case managers. So for any students that need extra support, be it academic, personal, mental health, we have specific staff there to assist our Hispanic and Latinx students with those needs. It's also a multi-service destination on campus where students can engage with various staff, campus partners, participate in culturally relevant programming, and meet fellow Blue Jays. So some of the specific resources include wellness programming, Latinx student development, and experiential learning support. So making sure that our students are getting meaningful hands-on experiences at the university prior to graduating, and being nestled right in the beautiful city of Chicago. We're just about 20 to 30 minutes outside of downtown Chicago. The opportunities for that experiential learning are just endless. So we are so happy to have this space on campus. And last but certainly not least, just a picture of the space. That it does go on. This is just sort of a snapshot of the whole room. But this was from our grand opening back in September, and I cannot wait to see all of the wonderful things they have planned for the rest of the year and next year and the years to come. So that's about all that I have. If anyone has any questions, I can leave my contact information with Samantha and Catherine. I have worked with Michigan students in the past, but we do have a designated counselor in our office that will be working with all Michigan students moving forward. So you kind of have the both of us at your disposal to assist you through the admissions process if you are interested in Elmhurst University. Thank you all so much for having me. Are there any questions before I give it back to Samantha and Catherine?
Yeah, thank you so much, Carrie. I think it was really helpful just to see a snapshot, right? We talk about all these different institutions. We try to share some videos to give people a glimpse into what they look like, but to be able to just see and get some good examples of like how the funding is being used and the types of programming and things. It's just really helpful. Any
Yeah, of
questions
course.
for Carrie?
Oh,
And again, we
thank
will
you.
share the contact information with you all in case you have more questions or interested in learning more. But thank you so much Carrie, for joining us this morning.
Yes, of course. Thank you for having us. All right. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. You too. All right. We're going to switch back here. You can go ahead. Oh, yeah, go ahead. Again, some just resources and recommendations. Again, just some different fact sheets. Excellencia in Education is an amazing website. They have tons of different examples of programs and things that are happening at all of these different schools. So that is a really, really great one just to kind of, again, get a sense of like the type of support that it's providing. And so again, all of these schools are receiving federal funding from some different pocket. And so, just to be able to see like how they're using that funding to support students happens in a lot of different ways. Some ways, or some schools, it's, through curriculum, some it's through spaces on campus, some it's through recruitment and retainment of staff. Some it's, in the enrollment efforts. So lots of different ways that schools are able to use the different funding sources. All right, and that brings us to the end of today's presentation. We know that it was quick. There is so much that we could talk about with all of these different. We wanted to give you kind of the, 10,000 level overview of these different types of institutions just to kind of increase our knowledge. Yes, there is no sign-in sheet. So again, if you just make sure that your name in Zoom is something that we can distinguish who you are. If you can't change your name, go ahead and throw your name in the chat and we will make sure that you get credit. You will be sent a recording. Any other questions? Again, feel free to throw those in the chat too if you think of any.
A couple of other just kind of points as we went through these 4 types of institutions. We know that there are fairly limited options within the state of Michigan, and that might make it more challenging for students to access these institutions, right? If you think about the role that state aid plays in making financial decisions and proximity to home and all of that. So a couple of other things just to be aware of. I think the hope for today's information is this is information that people are aware of about these types of institutions, but that it also opens that conversation around culturally affirming and culturally supportive practices at all campuses and universities, right? And so it is not unique to have a multicultural student center on a campus. That is always something that's great to ask, or to ask about a Black student union, or what kinds of cultural organizations do campuses have? If you take students to campuses, yes, you can go on their standard tour, but maybe ask to see those spaces as well. So the elements and the unique aspects of these institutions will always remain specific to that institution, but there are commonalities that I know you all know, but just want to elevate and remind to include in the college search process and recognizing the important role of identity in making a decision. The other one to think about is something that I know from a previous role that I was in, where some HBCUs will offer study away options for students. So for example, I had a student who attended a small liberal arts college on the East Coast, predominantly white institution, student identified as a Black student. financially, that was the best school for them to go to. It had the lowest bill. It was what they could afford to attend. But in terms of the students' wants, they had wanted to attend an HBCU. Because this small liberal arts college participated in this study away option, student was then able to spend their junior year at an HBCU. So they were able to spend their junior year at Howard University because then the financial aid went through their original institution. So that's a very specific example, but that could be something for students to research as they're making their list, which is, are there any options for programs, whether, so it's not study abroad because you're still within the United States, but for exchanges or study away opportunities for students to be able to have that experience for a portion of their college experience. I think those were the big things that I was talking about. We ready to shift into the key takeaways? Cool. All right. So I think our hope is that you take a moment right now to think about, how do you want to use today's information, and what are you curious to learn more about? So how do you want to share this information? How do you want to disseminate it to students? Do you have any programming coming up where this information is going to be particularly relevant? You can reflect for yourself. You could drop it in the chat as well. Give you a couple moments of think time. Meredith put a great idea in the chat. Right? Thinking about what age group are you working with, what's appropriate with them, right? Another idea could be to consider thinking about the social connections within your community or within your students' communities as well. So we did reach out to admissions officers at multiple institutions. As you may have heard, HBCUs are receiving a huge influx of applications and interest, and admissions officers transparently are not fully ready for that. This is prime application reviewing time. It's more of what it is. So we weren't able to have anybody join us, but another angle could be to look at alums, look at fraternities and sororities, particularly the Divine Nine fraternities and sororities in your area, to be able to have guest speakers or to be able to have people share their experiences of attending those institutions. Thinking about the role of the recommendations, the essays. Get curious about where your students attend, right? Yes, how do we stay in the land of you have lots of choices, and that's really exciting, right? All right. I am going to close us out with some additional resources. So just giving you a preview. Obviously, you can't click on your computer screens right now and get these PDFs, but we will get them over to you. If you have not already heard, if you are a secondary school counselor, MACAC, which is the Michigan Association of College Admissions Officers, is offering free membership for secondary school counselors. Just another resource and professional organization to help you build that college knowledge, build relationships as well. We will share links to all of the maps for these 4 types of institutions. And then I mentioned this when we were in the HBCU presentation, but U Aspire has done a phenomenal job of analyzing data around financially safer schools. So they have kind of a financially safer schools umbrella, then they have financially safer HSIs and financially safer HBCUs. And then specifically within the HBCUs, I know for sure they have an interactive map, so you can see estimated costs, net costs after financial aid, all of that. So we will send this presentation and the YouTube link out to all attendees. And then we will also post the YouTube video to our YouTube channel. You don't have to like and follow for more. And then future sessions. So Samantha leads a train the trainer style of career preparation skills, has sessions, whoop, my bad there, has sessions coming up in April on networking. Our career readiness network is meeting March 13th, April 24th, May 15th. You are welcome to join us. We always have career chats on our website. There, if you're in the Grand Rapids area, there are 2 talk-in tours coming up, so you can see some workplaces. And then our next college prep series is going to be focused on case studies, so reviewing of college university applications to sort of learn the nuances of applications, but also how schools evaluate or make decisions. And then in May, at the request of all of our K-8 folks, we are going to continue our Creating a College Culture in K-8. So that's all, folks. Our email addresses are up here if you have questions. You all did a fabulous job dropping your names in the chats. So thank you for that. Anything else you want to add? All right. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, if you have ideas, suggestion, or feedback, please let us know. We will hang on for a minute in case anybody wants to talk further, but have a great day and thanks for making the time this morning.